One man, one sauce, one desire. To take your taste buds on a journey of a lifetime. Introducing Bernie Wild's Adventure Sauce. Be ready to experience a rush of excitement, a hint of danger, a possibility of romance.
Hey, I got this. Hi, folks. Mike Rosado here, host of the Pencil Pushers podcast. I wanted to take a moment to share with you a new heat sauce that some of my friends and I have created called, that's right, Bernie Wild's Adventure Sauce. The all-purpose condiment sauce with a kick you've been waiting for. Unlike traditional hot sauces, Bernie Wild's focuses on the flavor and not the heat. Tangy, sweet, salty, savory, and smoky. With a bit of a kick, Bernie Wild's was made to put excitement back into your kitchen. But don't take my word for it. If you want to see what others have to say, visit BernieWilds.com to check out more. And speaking of, we also sell Bernie Wild's comic books and comic panels created and signed by me, not to mention super dope stickers, shirts, and more. I'm giving each and every one of our Pencil Pushers listeners 20% off for their first online order to show my love for all you supporters of the podcast. So just go to BernieWilds.com, place your order, and enter the code PENCIL. That's BURNYWILDS.com.
Bernie Wild's Adventure Sauce.
Today's episode is brought to you by MRC, a branding studio hailing out of Raleigh, North Carolina, where they focus on crafting killer design work for clients that love uber creative solutions for companies small and large. You can find and connect with them online at mrcraleigh.com. That's MRCRALEIGH, and at MRC Raleigh on Instagram. The good news is, if you find yourself reaching out, you'll most likely get to chat with yours truly. That's right, it's My Little Branding Co., and we're here to make your brand or idea look amazing. So let's connect.
Recorded at the Kitchen Studios. This is the Pencil Pushers Podcast.
Leadheads, I am thrilled to be joined in studio with newly landed Raleighite who's come to us via Cali, via Miami, via Havana. A new buddy of mine and kindred spirit, graphic artist Juan Morante, also known as El Gran Tocayo. Whoop, 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 whoop. Juan is a longtime artist in the counterculture arena of surfing and skating, bringing his creative vibes to everything from international brands like Vans to breweries like Firestone Walker in California. Juan is a true full-fledged creative spirit, diving into everything from small-scale packaging design all the way to large-scale murals across the nation. I am super pumped to have him here with me to pick his brain and talk shop. So without further ado, Juan El Gran Tocayo, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. So nice to meet you guys.
Man, it's really great to have you on the podcast. I felt like, just for a little background for the listeners, I first got to know Juan about a month and a half ago, when one of our designers at MRC told me about Juan and his beautiful illustration stylings. And that he was literally here in Raleigh, and I was immediately enamored with his work. And anyway, we had a big week-long event over at our office called the Happy Hour, or This Is Not a Happy Hour, and Juan came to one of the nights. We had a great time hanging out, and so glad to have gotten to meet him. And I love his style. Y'all are going to love his artwork. It's amazing. So we're going to dive into a little bit of his history, what brought him here. But as I always do with every one of our episodes, because this is a podcast where we speak to all kinds of different genres in the hand-drawn arts, I think it's good for people to get an understanding of like where you came from, man. Like, what's your history? So Juan, if you don't mind, tell us a little bit about where you are from originally and how art became the thing that you're super passionate about.
How far back do you want to go?
Day one, bud.
Day one. All right. Well, I was born in Cuba, came over in the Mariel boat lift. You should look it up. It's very interesting.
Talk about it. What is that exactly? I don't think I know.
A lot of people have seen Scarface. So the very beginning of Scarface, under the bridge with the fights and the tents, those were the people that didn't have relatives to pick them up and take them to their homes. Or the Mariel movement had, man, it was a massive exodus from Cuba. And what Castro did was like, okay, all these people that are like your day-to-day citizens want to leave Cuba. Is it really that bad? Well, if you guys want to leave, then here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to agree to Jimmy Carter's like open arms quote that he said, like, hey, we're an open arms country. If you got a boat, go get your relatives or whatever.
Yeah.
Castro went and emptied out his loony bins and his prisons. I don't know if loony bins is the proper, like, name for it, but that, but anyways, he emptied out his prisons and his like facilities with like folks that were not deemed to be part of society. And those guys got mixed in with the general population, and they all came to Florida initially. And it was a really big shock to like the American folks in Florida to see this massive migration of Cubans coming over.
Like shock, like in terms of like, I don't know if we want this, or shock in terms of, I didn't realize that this was actually such a dire situation.
Well, there wasn't social media back then, so it was like all we know is that there's, I mean, my numbers may be off, but there's like 150 to 200,000 Cubans coming over to Florida.
Yeah.
So Floridians, thought like, oh my God, are all these people coming to Florida?
Yeah.
But, apparently there'd been like plans devised to be like, okay, whoever doesn't have families, we're going to displace them to like New Jersey, Chicago, Minnesota, like anyone without families is going to get moved around, whether they want to or not. Anyone with families is going to get picked up by their families, and you don't have to worry about those folks all that much. But then you also have like your political prisoners and like crazy prisoners. Like, I mean, you have like,
it's not always going to be like well-intentioned families and individuals.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm not trying to give a Cuban history lesson right now, but like Cuba was a communist island, still is.
Yeah.
So everyone is educated. You have free health. You're educated whether you want to or not.
Yeah.
To a certain level, and then you can choose to opt out of education and go hit the fields and pick,
sugarcane,
cigar leaves, sugarcane, whatever, So you didn't have like just like random folks coming over. You had like doctors, lawyers, like,
And my understanding is actually a lot of times they were the more affluent, right? The more affluent you were, the better the chances were that you were probably not going to want to be a part of what Cuba had now become, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, so a little bit about my history. My parents and my family, we already had visas that we'd been working on for years to get. We were on our way to fly to Spain. So we, like if that would have happened, I'd probably be living in Spain still,
Wow.
But this thing happened in Cuba. These people hijacked the city bus and rammed it through the Peruvian embassy, knocked down the fence of the Peruvian embassy, and as soon as all the local neighborhood folks found out, they like ran out of their houses with whatever clothes they can carry and like went into the Peruvian embassy grounds because that's sovereign land. Cuba had no say in there.
What year was this?
In 1980.
Okay.
Going into 81. Man, there's I don't make any money off of this, but there's a book called Finding Mañana.
Yeah.
Amazing. This lady that was 16 during this entire movement wrote it when she was working for the New York Times, I believe. She's a professor, wrote for the Times, wrote this book, and Mañana was the name of the boat that brought her over. So I learned a lot about the movement through that book. It wasn't until I was older that I started talking to my parents about it, because I kind of tuned it out.
Sure.
Because, anyone that's
probably
interested in
something
this,
that your parents talk about, the older gen, type of thing, right?
yeah, and they didn't want to talk about it when I was a kid because like we all went through the trauma, like so we had our visas stripped because when that happened, they were like, okay, everyone that's gone through the formal ways of like trying to get out of Cuba for good, we're going to throw them into this group of people that are like just trying to leave the island because they don't agree with our politics. So they stripped our visas, threw us in with that group. And then there's a whole bunch of islands off the coast of Cuba, and they were like holding islands. Like I always call them, they were camps. They were like containment camps while you were waiting to get picked up by either your relative on a boat or, but usually you were there for 3 days max. This is another side story. This is too long.
No.
This is another side story.
This
but
is
like,
a lot. This is actually, first of all, I don't know about this.
Yeah.
As some of you may know, I'm Puerto Rican, so I have family, literally blood that's part Cuban, but there's still a lot that I'm still learning, so this is informative for me, and I know that this is going to be super informative for others. So please share.
So this movement's called the Mariel Movement. If you want to read a book or listen to Audible, Finding Manana is a great way to get educated on how it went down and what happened.
But where were you in the mix of all this? Like,
I was 3 years old.
Okay.
And after we had our visa stripped, we went straight to that containment island where we were waiting for our last names to be called out to jump on my uncle's boat, which never came. On day 2 of being there, we were only supposed to be there 3 days max because there was no showers. We ate once a day. It was like hard, uncooked rice with like green eggs, and pretty much that was it. And just like well water.
Right.
And when the food truck was coming, I ran to the well to wash my hands, and I tripped on a rock and smashed my left hand on a beer bottle.
Oof.
And it broke my skin at my wrist, and I was just bleeding out. And there were no doctors there, or there was like one doctor that was appointed by the Cuban military. But keep in mind, the Cuban military was like, these people are trying to leave the island. Screw these guys,
Yeah. Let them bleed.
Yeah. So a fisherman took me. He found me before my parents did, and took me into a tent and cleaned out my wound. And he saw I was already really pale. So he started just like stitching me up with fishing line.
Do you remember this at all?
I don't. It was so traumatic. Like, I mean, I was bleeding out.
Yeah.
This dude put a tourniquet on me, was stitching me up, and then eventually word got to my parents, and my parents showed up to the tent. Both my parents took turns passing out while they were watching their 3-year-old boy get stitched up. And I wasn't even crying or moving or anything, so I got stitched up. And that was 3 days, 4 days, 5 days passed. We were already supposed to be gone. It wasn't until like day 9 where a guard, one of the Cuban military guys, saw me because I was wearing a blue trench coat. And he was like, what is this family still doing here? Like, these guys were supposed to be gone. So we were there 9 days without taking showers, without, we were, in salt water. We would go to the salt water and like rinse our bodies, but so we never found my uncle. So we got put on a commercial boat with a whole bunch of like prisoners and like sketchy stuff. And I remember some of that. I remember the looks I was getting. I remember my dad picking me up over the rail on the boat as we were going towards Florida on like really high seas, like going up and down on the ocean. He would hold me out there so that I can pee and poop and stuff. And, and then when I got to Key West, you have a doctor that's looking at thousands of people coming in. And, he was like, okay, what's your injury? Are you okay? Okay, this guy's cool. This guy's here. Go over there for stitches. We'll go, Anyways, he saw my arm, and I'd got my injury on day 2, and I was there for 9 days, never washed it, never had medical treatment. So I had early stages of gangrene.
Oh, wow.
And the doctor just looked at my arm and then gave a hacking sign with his hand. And my mom went ape shit.
Sure.
And
so this is why you have your prosthetic arm now?
Yes. That's why I have a hook that I draw with.
And you
I
can
was
pop
gonna-
it out.
I was gonna-
It's an apple hook.
My artist name's actually supposed to be El Great Hooker, the El Gran Hooker. But no,
But then you found out it was copywritten by, it's already trademarked by
Yeah.
some lady in Las Vegas, right?
damn lady took my name.
But anyway, yeah. So
No, so this Cuban American nurse that came in the 60s was there and was like, calmed my mom down and was like, look, let's take him aside.
Yeah.
Told the doctor, like, I'll take him aside. I'll clean out the wound, take out the fishing line and restitch him. And she basically told my mom, like, if it doesn't heal,
yeah,
right, you need to take him to the any medical facility wherever you're at and amputate his arm because
Wow.
like it's he's
You don't
gonna
want it
get
to get
blood
worse,
poisoning
yeah.
and he's like, do you want him dead or do you want him without an arm, you know?
right.
So she cleaned it out, stitched me up, and thank God nothing happened. Now I just got a gnarly like Spider-Man bite there on my wrist.
Wow.
It's kind of sick. My tattoo artist actually went around it and like did my tattoo around the thing.
Oh wow. So it was way more noticeable beforehand.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
I mean, dude, I don't know how many stitches they put on me, but I had
Yeah.
quite the wound there,
Yeah.
So to this day, it's I don't know. Maybe that's why I don't draw or do anything amazing with my left hand.
Right on. So you arrive in Florida, and here you are, 3 years old. You get to Florida. Do you move directly to Miami, or because I know that this is where you landed for at least a minute, and obviously there's a huge population of Cubans and maybe secondarily Puerto Ricans and then Dominicans, perhaps.
Oh yeah. No. We landed in Florida and we immediately got picked up by my uncle who went to Cuba like 3 or 4 times looking for us and ended up bringing people back that wasn't us.
Oh wow.
Yeah, they filled his he had maybe an 8-person boat. They filled it up with like 15 people. And they had him bring it back over and over again. Uncle Pepe.
Yeah. Now, is he still around?
Oh yeah, he's still around.
Nice.
But he ended up finding us after we got to Key West, and he took us in, and he lived in Chicago. So we went to Chicago. This was, in the summertime, end of summer. And then the moment the first snow landed, my parents were like, nope.
Back down south.
I think they bought a $450 Pinto, and we drove straight in 2 days to Miami.
Yeah. That's hilarious. Yeah, it's. I'm always surprised at how many Latins actually live up north, considering the situation of how we're so used to being closer and much more attuned to the warmer weather.
Oh yeah, I mean some were acclimated to it. They're still there,
Yeah.
Every time I go to Chicago, there's a huge Cuban population.
It's funny because, I think about where different cultures reside that move to the United States, right? And, it's no surprise that you have people who are from, for example, the northern regions of Europe who move to, the Midwest, and they flourish over there. That's why you have such a huge population of Germans in Chicago. That's why you have, the Polish population. That's why sausages and the meat industry is heavily, supported by the culture that happened over there in those regions in Europe. That's another reason why the car industry in Detroit is so prolific, is because you have a lot of those people that were I always kind of equate it to, we always think about the Germans as being, movers, shakers. They're just like workhorses, and that's why you see Detroit being the motor city, right? Always movement. That's because I think as a Puerto Rican, I think they're just trying to stay warm. That's what I think. They're just trying to. to try to encourage heat. But yeah, man, that's so anyway. So you really kind of, I'm guessing that your childhood was mostly in Florida. Is that right? Is that where most of your upbringing was?
Yeah, I was in Florida until I turned 24. And by then I'd discovered surfing, and I was doing some art, but like I didn't know I did art, Like I got my degree from college in marketing and advertising.
Were you drawing much?
I was for like my friends. Apparently all my friends knew I had skill except for me.
Really?
So anytime any other bands were playing, they're like, "Hey man, can you draw a poster for us?" And then we'll Xerox copy it. And I was like, "Yeah, sick, anytime." Like I never got paid for anything. And
so you were doing artwork, not really for for necessarily the passion of like doing the artwork. You were doing it for the passion of like doing something for somebody else, essentially. Like, you just wanted to be a part of the scene, whether it was music or whatever.
Yeah, well, I mean, going back to like, okay, now I'm 6, going on 7. I would like trace out the Sunday comics like Gomer Pyle and Heathcliff and all, like I would trace them out. I would put a lamp under my glass table and like trace them out. And so my one of my best friends.
Did you have like a man-made like light table or something, or were you actually just have like a glass dining table?
Maybe that's where I missed my chance to become a millionaire. I think I invented my own glass, like my own light
table, right?
I just grabbed a lamp,
and
put it on the floor.
That's what you got to do.
And we had a like table, like an end table for the couch that had glass in the middle, and I would just put the light underneath and like trace the trace the drawings out, and like drawing them over and over again. Like I got it pretty down, like not Gomer Pyle, was Bailey or something.
Beetle Bailey.
Beetle Bailey, that's what it was.
Yeah, the comic strip version of Gomer Pyle.
Exactly. Yeah. So maybe I invented a light box back then. Who knows? You heard it here first. 1983. I came up with a light box. But after a while, I stopped like tracing stuff out because I had already like my cord, like my hand was pretty tight. Like I was doing nice lines for someone my age, and my writing was always really good. And so I drew for fun up until I was about like 10 or 11 or 12.
Were you doing anything in school, like taking art classes or anything like that with intention?
Not really. And you know what's crazy is whenever this was more like junior high and high school, whenever the art class had like some kind of, like contest, like, hey, we're going to draw a pirate ship for this day or whatever, I'd always end up winning like first or second place, like, and get $75. And I'd be like, sick, I got $75, and I'm like, and even then I still wasn't like, oh yeah, I just thought everyone knew how to draw.
All right.
I never thought about it. Like my parents were blue collar. They were never around. I was raised with my grandma. I didn't find out my dad drew until I was like 28. And I visited Florida. I was drawing something for my friend Rob's wedding. I painted Steve McQueen on a super sick, like thick paper, and that was their wedding gift. And while I was painting it with watercolors and stuff, my dad sat next to me and started drawing like Cadillacs and Chevys or whatever. And I was like, geez, Dad, like you can draw? And I was like, I've never seen you draw in my entire life, And I was like, this is insane. And I was like, this is where I get it from,
Wow.
Yeah. So that was pretty trippy to see. But like, my parents were never around, you know. They both had 2-3 jobs, and it wasn't until I was 11 or 12 where like we moved up from like lower class to like lower middle class, and I had more access to more stuff and like more friends, and things got a little easier. But I also got sidetracked that I basically stopped doing art at that time. I was doing art because I was home alone, and I was an only child. My parents never had any more kids because we were like Cuban immigrants, broke as broke as a joke.
Yeah, and you're my age, so we had cable, if you're lucky, but we definitely didn't have cell phones with like all kinds of distractions, right? So you might have been lucky if you would have had video games, home video games and stuff like that. So it was so easy to just kind of like get into your own zone, especially if you didn't have siblings around. But, if you're not out running around with your BMX bike or your skateboard, you're basically, kind of sitting around watching TV. But a lot of times if you are by yourself, you're sitting down with a piece of paper and a pencil and some markers and kind of getting at it. You might have your comic books open, referencing those things, getting inspired by how cool everything looks there. And then was that sort of the thing for you too?
Absolutely. But you know what? I didn't have cable till late into my teens. I think I wasn't until like 16, maybe.
Okay.
When we first got our first
same
cable.
For me too. Yeah.
So I was like engulfed in the skate culture, and my neighborhood happened to have some really talented like hood rats that were like super good at skateboarding.
Nice.
And like I happen to live in front. I had the front unit, and then the back unit was one of my boys, Francis, who was like, dude didn't know anything about skateboarding, but the kid was mad talented. I would be like, hey, I'm trying to learn how to ollie. This is what you're supposed to do. And then he would figure it out before me, and I was like, how did you do that? And then I'm like, okay, so now
This
then
is like condos or apartments or something like that?
yeah, like duplexes and like hood duplexes.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
we faced warehouses.
Yeah.
So you could do whatever you want there. We were fine,
Yeah.
But then same thing, like, okay, the next trip is kickflip. Like, so Francis would always learn everything first, but then I'd master it, like
okay.
he would do a sloppy version of it and land it right away.
Ooh.
But I perfected it to like, no, you got to make it like come up and like slap your feet, like. But anyways, we lived in a neighborhood that was so competitive that like it got to a point where like once we got good enough at skateboarding, mind you, we were all poor in this neighborhood.
Right.
We would have contests instead of fist fighting someone. We would be like, oh yeah, you don't agree with me or whatever, like obviously I'm being not grotesque, but I was like, we instead of fighting, we'd like, let's have a skate off, like we had like waist high launch ramps. That's how big. There wasn't kickers. It was like a waist or chest high launch ramp where you're like, this is not going to be good for our knees coming, like in the future,
Yeah.
And we would have contests to see who won, and the neighborhood kids would vote. And man, if you lost, you would have to bring your own skate tool and take your board off, and you gave your board to whoever won the contest. Oh yeah.
Whoa. Okay.
So me and Francis got really good
Competitive,
because we were all poor, but me and Francis were really poor. So we
you
were
wouldn't
like,
want to lose a board.
I was like, yo, we need to get on some of those brand new skateboards that kid from across the street is getting, like.
Yeah. Where I've often wondered. I was actually not a skater. I was more of a BMXer, right? And of course, it was always like butting the heads. Which one was cooler, obviously. But were you kind of getting into like Thrasher magazine and things like that, or were you not even into that at all? Okay,
I was, but I didn't have much. Like I lived in a part where like there weren't bookstores. Like you go to the local convenience store and there were like mad porn magazines.
Right.
Maybe a Mad magazine, which was always my favorite. I'd buy a Mad magazine.
Mort Drucker.
And every once in a while, like a BMX mag or like a Thrasher mag would show up, and I would be like, sick! And then I'd see all the board graphics and be like, oh my God, this is amazing. And I basically lived my life off crossing my fingers, hoping that there were more, the next
issues
month would have more issues instead of like more porno mags, 'Cause, I mean, porno mags were
very
a hot commodity in my neighborhood.
Teenage boy, I must say.
Well, no, I was probably 12 at that time. I was like, I couldn't even buy the porno mag, but I couldn't buy porno mags, but I could buy cigarettes.
So clearly this rolls right around the time, I'm sure, where you start to get maybe a little nerdy about skater art, which leads you into what later became a career. Is that true? When you start looking at these magazines, you start looking at, the different board designs that are happening. I mean, obviously at this time, I honestly do not know now what skater boards look like in terms of illustration styles or whatever. But certainly the amount of fun and vibrancy and edginess and, illustrations were such a huge part of a cool skateboard back in those days. So were you getting inspired and starting to kind of like dig into, pencil on paper? I know you were saying that wasn't something you thought about much, but in retracing the steps now, do you remember kind of getting inspired by how cool everything was with the boards? Or was it just more of like a background part of your life and your lifestyle, that it was just something you sketched around with, but not really with much intention?
You know what? It was definitely a background part of my lifestyle at that point, because I was so into skateboarding that I like wanted to focus on the craft.
Yeah.
But
The
I'd be
craft
lying.
of skateboarding?
Oh
Or,
yeah, on the craft of skateboarding. Like I got good pretty fast. 80s good.
Right.
You see skateboarders now and it looks like you're playing Tony Hawk Pro Skater and you're like, how the hell did he do that?
Right.
Like a flip trick to a rail and then a flip trick off. I'm like, yeah, I never got there. But
Right,
I was 80s good, But I'd be lying if I said the art wasn't a huge part of it, because my thing was I never wanted to be the kid with like the popular skateboard. Like I wanted to do research, especially now that I was getting my hands on Thrasher magazines and seeing all the board graphics.
Mm-hmm.
I had an older cousin, this guy Alvin, that actually married me and my wife.
Oh, nice.
He would listen to a lot of like rad music that I was like, ¿Qué es esto? What is this crap? Like, what is this music? Like I'd be in his Trans Am or Camaro. I forgot what he drove, but he would always listen to Jimi Hendrix and all this stuff. So when like World Industries and Ron Chapman started doing like the Ron Chapman Experience, and it was like Ron Chapman's face in separate angles, and it was basically a Jimi Hendrix album knockoff. I was like, that's the board I want to ride. I don't want to ride the Tony Hawk. I don't want
Was
to
he
ride.
a skater? I have no
Yeah,
idea.
yeah.
Okay,
He was a
gotcha.
skater, like
Yeah.
super. I actually never really saw him skate at the time, but his board graphics was sick. So I always wanted to be the kid that had that obscure graphic where people see it and they're like, yo, that thing is sick, dude. What is that?
Right.
And I got really into Nautiskopis skateboards. Like he always Nautiskopis is a legend, but he wasn't like a Tony Hawk or like a Caballero or Lance Mountain, the big dogs, like he was like street skater guy that would like ollie over a car, and you're like, how did he do that? Is this guy like an alien? Like his name backward is Satan, like he must have sold his soul.
I got this Jim Phillips book, right? I think I was telling you about this before we started up. And what I've gleaned from that, because I'm a voracious book buyer who looks at all the artwork and does very little reading of the book.
Yeah.
And what I gleaned from it is that there were skaters that had, that would get sponsored by maybe skateboard companies, and then they would get illustrators to develop maybe different boards that had like a certain illustration or style or something. Is that true that was kind of the case? Like each skater that was sponsored had their own illustration or brand, as it were, from a graphic standpoint, or no?
You know what? You had to have been a really good standout pro skater to have that happen. Gotcha. Usually every company has an artist that's attached to it.
Okay, gotcha.
Like, so the main brand in the 80s was Pal Peralta.
Sure.
And the guy that does all the art for that was Vernon Cortland Johnson, who's amazing.
Yeah.
You know,
Is he still around?
He's still alive, yeah. I actually just bought 2 of the boards signed by him, and I was like, sick, I'm gonna hang these.
Like newer ones or from back then?
No, they're issues.
Oh, wow.
But he just showed up to a skate shop in Santa Barbara that happens to be a Powell Peralta skate shop.
Nice.
And whenever he shows up to say hi, they're like, hey, do you mind signing like 100 boards? And he's like, sure.
Yeah, right.
So
as long as I can get it cut.
Yeah, so I bought a few of those. But anyways, he was assigned to that. And then Jim Phillips, his dad, Jeff Phillips, was the one that did all the Santa Cruz skateboards art for the 80s.
Right.
And that's super iconic. I mean,
amazing.
Powell Peralta and Santa Cruz had the gnarliest graphics.
Yeah.
Hands down, those are the 2 companies that like still inspire me to this day, you know. But there were, you know, like that led me, that skate scene and the skate art, whatever, led me into my next stage as an older teen, like almost done with high school. I started surfing late in life, but like all my skateboarding transitioned over really easily into surfing.
Mm-hmm.
And I just started painting on my own surfboards for fun. And, you know, at the time, like, you know, after like 2 years of surfing, I was surfing like a skateboarder. So I'd like be flying down the line, and I would like, I didn't care if I looked pretty and gracious, you know, like I would fly off, I would go down the line and find a lip and like launch off of it and do a huge air. And then you would see the graphic that I painted on the bottom of my surfboard. And then from that, other people in the, you know, I worked at a surf shop then too, the only surf shop in South Beach at the time. So they were like, dude, the dude at the surf shop paints on the bottom of all his boards. And you got to, you know, I also had the stigma of like, I got to get better and better because I'm the guy, the face of the surf shop, you know?
Yeah.
So I worked at a surf shop called Exile, and it's actually, I think it was the studio that Muhammad Ali trained at in the 60s. Same area, 5th and Washington.
Really?
Yeah. So people started coming to the surf shop and asking me if I would paint on their boards. And I was like, oh, man, I don't know. I'm pretty busy. And he's like, I'll pay you. And I was like, all right, cool. So that kind of like became a thing.
You were still a teenager at this time?
No, I was already kind of like, I was like 19 or 20.
Yeah.
Like on the cusp of like, you know, drinking. I mean, I was already drinking. It's Miami. You're like, you know, you're basically a grown up by the time you're 15 or 16, you know.
Right.
People are having kids and, you know, like.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, right around, you know, after that surf shop era where like I really like, I kind of backed off skateboarding and like focused on surfing because it was so much fun, and I got to travel from Florida to Central America was like $200 round trip. So I would go every like 2 months.
Wow.
Yeah. So I got really good at surfing really fast. Yeah, because Florida surfing is very fickle.
Sure.
You need a hurricane or a storm or some kind of
that's what I've
disturbance.
always heard, right?
Yeah, so I would fly to Nicaragua and Costa Rica, and like, man, within 2 years, I had advanced like what it would have taken most people 6 to 8 years to learn, you know? So I had a bunch of friends that were sales reps for surf brands, and this is kind of what led me into my career. My buddy Eyal worked for Quicksilver. He was a sales rep, Arnett Sunglasses. He was like, I have a sales meeting in San Diego, in Orange County, but I'm staying in San Diego. Do you want to come? And I was like, yes, I want to come. Like, I can stay for free. I just got to feed myself, bring my surfboards.
Yeah.
First time ever in California, I fell in love with the place. It was dead of summer where it's supposed to be flat, and the waves were like waist to chest high and like beautiful and perfect weather. And
oh my God.
Yeah. So as soon as I graduated from college, I was like, see you later, girlfriend. See you later, parents. I'm out. And I went to California at age 24.
Wow.
And stayed there 20 years. And that's where I met my wife and got jobs in the industry, and, you know.
So, but so you got there at 24, and what was like, I mean, at this point, were you trying to really get into the graphic art realm full time at this point, or no?
Not yet. Because I still didn't know that I could draw. Right. I had no idea. Like, dude, I swear to God, I still thought everyone knows how to draw. Like, everyone knows how to walk. Everyone knows how to, you know, throw a football. You know, I was like, I never thought of...
Juan. you're not living in a vacuum. Clearly, you knew that there weren't a bunch of friends of yours that were doing what you were doing. How did you really honestly think that everybody knew how to draw?
Man, I think because of the way I was brought up, like, hey, there's food. All right, eat a shit ton of it because you never know when you're going to eat again. You know, like, I was more worried about like trying to get a job and make money because my parents were so blue collar that I didn't focus on what I was good at. I knew I was good at skateboarding and I knew I was good at surfing and, you know, like mediocre at music, you know, and like I thought I was mediocre at art, you know, except for like my surfboards always had like really rad paintings because I felt like I knew myself and I was like, this is going to be amazing if I painted on a surfboard, you know? So when I went to California, I got a job at another surf shop with a college degree. Like I couldn't find a real job. So
What was your degree in?
Marketing and journalism. So I went and worked at a surf shop in California. I was like the oldest guy there, you know? So I immediately became like a junior manager. Yeah. But it was right across the street from the ocean. So I surfed at lunch.
Wow.
Before I opened, afterwards, you know, like I was a surfing machine. But right as it was time for me to like make a move because like California is expensive. Even back then in 2001, it was still expensive, you know, like for someone with not a lot of money saved.
Sure.
I went there. I got there right after July 4th and right around like I spent 9/11 there. That was trippy. Like half the pilots that like crashed into the buildings lived in the neighborhood I lived in.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So that was a trip. But come early December, like, you know, almost Christmas time. I spent Christmas by myself that year, but right before Christmas, like a week before Christmas, I went and skateboarded knowing that like I'm probably going to have to like pack all my stuff up and go back to Florida because like clearly I didn't make it, you know? And, you know, from July to December without a real job, you know, using my degree, I went and skateboarded at this like fancy supermarket that I would go to in La Jolla I think it was called Michael's, not the art place. But anyways, it was the only place that was lit up at night for no reason because it was closed down.
Yeah.
So we had curbs waxed up and stairs and all kinds of stuff. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to go skate and drink a beer and whatever. And dude, I swear to God, as soon as I parked, I didn't have money to pay rent, you know. As soon as I parked, I turned off my truck and I opened the door. And before I even stepped out, I saw a wad of cash. And I was like, what in the world is that? I thought it was like a joke, you know, like someone was going to be pulling on fishing line or whatever.
you
have
to keep chasing it down the sidewalk.
Yeah. And I got out and I picked it up. And dude, it was a wad of hundreds. And it was probably like 600.
Like in a roll or something or what?
It fell out of someone's pocket when they were getting their car keys, dude. That's my thing. I'm like, who else would have a roll of cash like that, you know?
Yeah.
So it was a fancy supermarket, kind of like before Whole Foods and Sprouts and all that stuff. Like, so I found all that cash and I was like, oh my God, I didn't even skate because I was worried that they'd come back to look for it. So I got back in my car and I was like, screw this, I'm going home. I'm like, I got rent for 1 more month.
Right.
And dude, I swear to God, as soon as I went home, paid rent, not 2 weeks later, my buddy Miles' girlfriend's mom came into the shop and she owned a marketing agency.
Okay.
And she was like, hey, I heard you had a marketing degree. Do you want to be my assistant or whatever? And I was like, maybe, you know, like that sounds awesome. Like I interviewed with her and like,
did you have a portfolio to show, or
I did,
guess it was
but
just
it was
more
very,
like a resume?
you know,
Because
like
marketing is a completely different thing, right?
Yeah, I did have a setup. Like I had a like physical portfolio, like nice folder you opened up with laminated pages. Oh yeah. But she liked what she saw, and you know, she saw that I was like a manager at a surf shop and managed kids or whatever, so she knew I had some kind of like organizational skill. Exactly. Yeah. So she hired me, and man, I worked for her for like 3 years, and she basically saved my life.
Wow.
Her name's Marla, and like she owned a place called the Response Shop, and it was in La Jolla Cove. So
Wow.
I would surf at lunch every day. Like she was barely ever around. Like
And you were making a legit salary at that point.
yeah,
I guess, right?
mean, it wasn't a lot.
Modest.
It wasn't
right,
a
yeah.
lot, but like, dude, I was right across the street from the ocean, a block away from this surf shop that's classic in San Diego called Mitch's Surf Shop.
Okay.
One of the dudes that worked there, his name was Matus. He started Matus wetsuits. If you look them up, they're like the Gucci wetsuits now.
Dude,
like they're expensive, but
what a
they're amazing.
great
And
name.
it's like
Matus wetsuits.
yeah, dude, and it's like Patagonia. It's all made out of like
wow.
sustainable stuff, like
Okay.
really warm, like
Yeah.
you know. But anyways, like, so while I was working for her, I realized I'm still not doing any art. Like I was like, this is really like more
Were
of
you-
like a secretary type job.
Yeah. And
Instead
were
of
you not
doing
doing any artwork, even just like by yourself at the house or anything like that?
On my surfboards. I still was doing
was
surfboard art
it.
for myself. So I was living in Pacific Beach at the time, and there's a great pier there with a lot of people, and it was very competitive.
Okay.
And I could hold my own at the time. And at that time, I was already launching a bunch of airs, like, which was great for my art. Cause like, if, you know, I always saw in magazines, like people with art on the bottom of their surfboards always came out in the magazines or whatever. And that's not what I was doing it for, cause I'd been doing it before that. But someone saw my art, asked me while I was getting out of my wetsuit in the parking lot, like, hey, do you ever want to do this? You know, like, for surf shops or whatever, or for like a brand. And I was like, yeah, dude, I'm always down. Like I do it on my boards for fun because every time I get a new board, you know, I want it to be me, you know?
Yeah.
And it got back to Rip Curl, which surprisingly
What?
enough is one of my biggest clients today still.
What?
Yeah. So Rip Curl at the time was opening up, they were setting out a plan to open up stores in like Vegas, Ala Moana, Inland Empire, somewhere in California, like Colorado. Like they were opening up stores in malls everywhere. And
One of
This-
the only.
yeah, and this one guy hit me up, this guy Ty, and he was like, dude, I saw your surfboard arts, and you know, I had a little printout with like, I made a printout.
What year is this, by the way?
2003.
Okay.
So 2 years after I was in Cali.
20 whole years ago.
Yeah. Oh my God. I'm sold. I'm a worthless piece of shit. I deserve to die.
That went downhill fast.
No, but anyways, this guy got a hold of my little calendar that I made for fun, you know, with
Yeah.
all my art for every month. And he was like, hey, we're opening up stores everywhere. We need 10 boards every month, 5 for the men's side of the store and 5 for the women's side of the store. We're not going to give you any direction. Just don't make it pornographic or political or whatever. Just draw whatever you want. Waves are great. Flowers, you know, zombies, skeletons, fire,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
kind of like Lost. At the time, Lost was doing, this guy, Drew Brophy, was like the inventor of like paint marker art on surfboards. And so I did a lot of stuff kind of like him at that point. It was my first time going into commercial art, you know, and I was like, this is sick, you know, like I don't get any direction.
Yeah.
I give them 10 boards. They were paying me $100 a board. So every time I do it,
$100?
yeah. So they were, you know, I got $1,000 a month from them aside to my work, you know, aside from my salary. So I was like, sick, this is awesome. And on top of that, I got like free wetsuits and they hooked me up with a board from time to time. So, you know, it had its perks. But after I did that for like almost a year, the dude was like, hey, can you do t-shirts for us? But you need to know how to do computer stuff. And I
Yeah.
was like, I don't know what a computer is. And I was 20, you know, it was still, I was 25 at the time.
Late
So,
20s,
yeah.
right? Yeah.
And I was like, no, I really, like, I can give you art, but you guys would have to separate it or whatever. And he was like, no, man, like, okay, well, let's just keep doing surfboards for now. And then after that, I was like, I need to learn how to use a
Yeah.
computer.
Were you interested at that point at all? Okay.
I did. And I talked to my boss at the time and I was like, hey, I love you. You're awesome. You're very generous. I'm not growing
Yeah.
with you. I'm basically your glorified secretary that
Yeah.
has awesome perks and I get to surf all the time and
Yeah.
a Starbucks card that loads itself.
Totally.
You know? But I was like, I want to go to art college. So I went to Art Institute and I'm still paying
AI?
that off. Yeah, AI. And it went out of business. So I don't know if I should still be paying
Wow.
it. But like the one in San Diego no longer exists and I'm still paying student loans on it. But anyways, I learned a lot from there really fast. Like I was a 20-something-year-old dude at AI. So like I wasn't screwing around. I didn't take any electives. I didn't take math, English, any of that. I basically aced every class, and I was like, dude, I was like a sponge. I was never so driven in my life.
Yeah. So
And-
just like pretty much a light switch just
It did,
went on.
yeah. I realized that like I can do this commercial stuff, you know, and like,
Yeah.
dude, before I even like 2 months before I graduated from AI, one of my buddies that I surfed with was like, hey, my cousin works at Reef Brazil, the sandal company with the butts.
Yeah, Reef.
Yeah. And I was like, okay. And he's like, they're looking for a junior graphic designer. And I was like, okay, yeah, I'm
Wow.
gonna go for it, you know. And dude, I nailed the interview, got a job right away. And I was like, man, should I even finish college? And they were like, dude, you got 2-3 months left, may as well. And
Finish
I was
it,
like,
yeah.
all right, cool, whatever. But yeah, then I got a job at Reef Brazil. Came in with all this like young energy and like graphic heat,
Fire,
you know,
yeah.
and like my bosses were pumped on it. Everyone else was like, some of the other designers were like not super pumped on me because I was so fresh and green and, you know, had all this energy. But at the end of the day, like everyone became like my family, you
Yeah.
know, like everyone was super rad. It was the first time I ever heard South African dialect. I was like, oh my God, I don't understand my bosses. I don't know what they're telling me. They're like, hey, bro, you know what we just told you? I was like, oh my
Yeah.
God, are you speaking
Yeah.
English? And it's like, yeah, we'll slow it down for you, bro. You know? And I was like, okay. And then from there, it just like, you know, I worked there for a few years and then I got a job at Fox Racing. I did freelance for a while, got a job at Fox Racing and did that for like 6 years. And that was awesome because I got to do women's graphics, which I'd never done. Worked in the women's department, moved over to the men's department. And while I was doing that at Fox Racing, I was like, I got this down. I need more. So I started doing art for fun, not on surfboards.
Yeah.
And that got crazy. That opened up an entire new world to me.
Is this where you started getting into like mural art and stuff like that too?
Not
or no?
yet, but like, yeah, pretty much. Because I did a few, I did my first solo art show while I was at Reef. It was called One Night Stand because we only rented the place for a week and we were only open for one night. So, you know, the poster was a nightstand, you know, you know, like, and we basically got everyone at Reef that had like any desire to do creative art for this art show.
Yeah.
And it was a huge success.
Wow.
Killed it. But I was the one curating it. So it was my first time ever like organizing artists and mounting art and like hiring bartenders and security. And,
Sure.
you know, like it was insane. I was like, I didn't know I was capable of that. So then I started doing it for myself. And then my first solo art show was a Cuban themed art show. I did voodoo iconic like designs that I, you know, like there's no real images of like what Elewa looks like. So I drew my own version of Elewa, or, you know, like I did like Afro-Cuban baseball players and like Catholic inspired, like, you know, saints and stuff.
Yeah.
And dude, that thing was a hit too. Obviously, I was pricing my stuff at like dirt cheap prices. So all the rich
Were you
late-
doing like, were these like prints or were these
no, on wooden canvases.
like, okay.
And they were like up to like 3 by 5 feet, you know, some of
Yeah.
them were, but they were all wooden canvases. And like, this was in Encinitas, and Encinitas was like a surf town of like wealthy folks. So people would be walking the strip because it was in a place called the Lumberyard, and they would just pop into this boutique that my friend's wife owned. And I sold every piece on opening night, and I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. I
Wow.
should do this more often, you know? And dude, that opened up the floodgates. And then eventually I met my friend. Dude, this guy, I still owe him like so much. Like my buddy Davey, he had a company with another guy, Brett, called Field Trip Entertainment. And Brett basically hired musical talent.
Okay.
And Davey basically built up walls and hired muralists for one night of like a music event. So like you would have like
where we do like live mural art while
Yes.
while the shows were going
while
on.
the show's going on. So like people are, you know, like there's opening bands, there's like 5-6 bands, so it's like a long day, you know. So people see us setting up, we're all freestyling our own art. That was the theme. We never like pre-planned, we just kind of like
Sure.
freestyled.
Sure. Yeah.
So we would go up there and, you know, I use brushes. I never, like, to this day, I'm still not really good with spray cans, but like,
dude,
you know.
cans are hard.
It is, man.
It's a whole other ball game.
I need to familiarize myself with the tips. I feel like once I learn the tips,
That's
I'm
the key.
going to get
Right,
it down,
right.
you know. To this, you know, I still use cans for filling up large spaces and stuff.
Okay, yeah.
But anyways, this guy Davey built out all the walls and hired all the artists. So I became friends with like some of the coolest skateboarder, like rad artists in San Diego at the time that I never knew.
Okay.
If it wasn't for this.
Yeah.
And Davey himself is a badass artist. I'll give you his Instagram handle later so you can check it out.
Nice.
But he's still doing stuff like that, you know. He was in charge of the Warped Tour for a few years. He did like the vibe of the Warped Tour.
Whoa,
and,
okay.
yeah. So I did a few festivals with him. 91X was a huge radio station in San Diego. They had X Fest, MGMT, The Strokes, like all these giant bands would be playing on stage. They would build a mini ramp for us and a huge wall, and we're all just painting whatever we want, drinking beers, skating the mini ramp. And meanwhile, we were like roped off so no people can get in. And people were tripping, dude. They were like, man, we love watching the progress,
artists,
you know?
yeah,
like
yeah.
they would come in at noon and then they'd come back at 6 and be like, dude, this is sick.
Yeah, this
like,
is
holy
this is
shit.
probably before the cameras were able to do like the whole time lapse thing.
Oh yeah. Well, they were still doing time lapses there, but it was harder.
It was
wasn't-
harder.
Yeah.
It was harder because you had to have somebody who had a very specific camera that could sit there and do
Exactly.
it. It's not like with the cell phone now where you can just
No.
like, you know, just prop a tripod up there and just let it go.
Yeah, no, we had actual legitimate photographers that we'd hire to do the time lapses. And, you know, the same photographers would go on stage and take photos of the artists and stuff. And so we did that for a good 2 years, dude. And through that is where the first restaurateur, I guess is what they're called. I don't know, people
Yeah.
that open up mad restaurants.
Yeah.
Yeah, this guy Mauricio had a bar in San Diego right by the airport called the Airport Lounge, but he was opening up a Mexican restaurant in South Park in San Diego, and he was like, "Man, I like saw your art, you know, and like, I think you'd be great for this. Do you want to, you know, do murals in the entire restaurant?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm down, absolutely."
Yeah.
So I did that restaurant. That was my first, and I was like, dude, this place is sick. And every time I go in there with my like now wife, like we'd always eat for free and drink for free. So I was like, this is sick. You know, like it doesn't matter regardless of like,
VIP, baby.
yeah, I was
Yeah,
like, I
right,
didn't get
right.
paid much to do the
Yeah.
mural, but like, you know, like,
Yeah.
I mean,
That's one of the
every
perks.
wall
And
had a
sometimes
mural.
that's what you do, man. You know, it's like, you know, I'm not getting paid. I mean, and even now, I'm sure that there are opportunities. I know that's the case for me too. Is like, you know, if they don't have a high budget, or you know, a budget appropriate to the value of how, you know, how cool the work is, how good the work is, you work it out where you're like, okay, well, I love what you're doing. Maybe I could get some sort of, whether it's licensing, you know, I get a percentage, or, you know, maybe I get tacos for life for at least the next 2 years.
Oh
you know?
yeah, absolutely. And you know what? I need to start doing that more. Believe it or not, after all these years of doing art, 20 years now, I still don't have contracts. I still don't have anything. I'm very like handshake guy, and like sometimes I underprice myself, and like, you know, and it hasn't happened often, but some people take my kindness for weakness, and that's not the case. Like,
No.
I basically tell people to fuck off all the time without telling them that. I'm like, yeah, we're good. Like,
I think what it boils down to, and tell me if you agree, I think what it boils down to is if you are not what we would easily call struggling, and you're able and you're enjoying yourself, and you're not like living necessarily paycheck to paycheck, and you can do it, there's nothing wrong with just saying, no, I'm okay with just making lesser amount because I enjoy the work. I enjoy the people are cool, and I'm learning a little bit, right?
yeah, absolutely. You know, But that's part of that's basically what it boils down to. Because I have some clients that are just coming in to me and they're like, hey, we need a beer can graphic. This is our budget. And I'm like, shit, that's sick. I'm like, okay, yeah, we'll do it. But then I have like mom and pop brewery that's like, we don't have much money, but can you do this for us?
Yeah.
We'll give you free beers and we'll pay you this much. And I'm like, absolutely. If you're not like, not a terrible person, then I will also, and I like your beers, then I would also do that, which is what I did in Oklahoma. Like, I worked for a company that like didn't have much money, but they were all rad, super rad folks. Like, it wasn't about the money with them. It was more about like, I made such fast friends working at this brewery that I was like, dude, these guys are nice, man. I will work for, just, they put me on retainer. So every like 2 months every 2 weeks I get like a little paycheck coming in and I was like, oh, this is sick. Like, I wasn't planning on this,
Yeah. Let's get into how all that started. Dude, there's so much more to talk about, but let's start where we were, man. I mean, this takes us into the next phase of, you start getting into packaging design, right? You start doing illustration work. How did that all come about?
We were at surfboard art. Yeah. So yeah, I got the job at Reef, did some pretty fun stuff for t-shirts and hats and board short prints. And then, fast forward a few years, I got the job at Fox Racing, and they actually had a surf team at the time. So that was part of my draw to it, because I was a big fan of some of the surfers. I thrived at Fox Racing. I worked in the women's department for like 2 years out of the 6.5 that I worked there.
And what were you doing there?
Same thing, like at the time it was all tattoo art. So like,
nice.
I was like, that was down my pipeline. So I was like, yeah, tough chicks, tattoos with thorns and barbed wire,
right,
and like skulls.
Yeah,
And then eventually the men's team lost a graphic designer. And I always had my ear to the ground. So I was like, please get me out of the women's department.
You may or may not have contributed to the loss of that individual.
Yes. So yeah, and then I moved over to the men's team, and that was the best thing that ever happened, because one of my mentors, and like, okay, so Davey's one of my like artist mentors, like as far as fine art goes.
Yeah.
But then one of my like actual like graphic design mentors, this guy Matt Alvarez, got hired at Fox, and I worked with him briefly at Reef, and he was like, dude,
you got to understand Illustrator.
You got no. He told me, he was like, you're the most talented person on this friggin' team. Like,
nice.
You need to leave this company. And I was like, I was like, rookie. I was like, what are you talking about? I was like, I had no idea what he meant.
You don't want me here, man.
Yeah. But anyways, he quit because he was like, he had beef with Reef right away. They didn't give him half the stuff he was promised.
That's the name of his first book, actually.
Beef with Reef by Matt Alvarez. I'm going to send him this link so he can hear that. But anyways, to this day, I still talk to the dude. Like, he's one of my mentors. And
nice.
Anyways, he was the art director for Fox Racing at the time, for men's, and I worked with him every day. Me and him click. He knows how I work. He would like collage things for me, and I learned a lot from that, because like now I collage a lot of stuff like for my illustrations. I come up with ideas, and I'm like, whenever someone's like, hey, I want you to draw a sprocket with a test tube and a fucking, like, I'm like, I don't know what any of that stuff looks like. I like Google it up, and like, I
Mash
do a
it all
collage
together?
before I start like, sketching it out and then making it my own.
Interesting.
But I worked with him for a few years there. And then while I was at Fox, people from Billabong hit me up. I started doing a lot of work on blogs, believe it or not. And at the time, blogs were all the rage. And I started doing a bunch of surfing zombies, and it somehow made its way to Billabong.
For surfer blogs or what?
No, just for my own blog. But it was like a really cool illustration I did of a zombie on a skateboard, then on a surfboard, and it was based off of a famous Jay Adams photo. And I had a bunch of friends.
Is he a surfer?
He was a skateboarder from the original Dogtown crew. He's passed since, he died a few years ago, maybe like 3 years ago.
Okay.
But Jay Adams is a legend. He's like him, Tony Alva were like the two most famous guys. Stacy Peralta was the third famous guy on that crew.
Okay.
Stacy Peralta started Powell Peralta with George Powell,
Yeah.
So it's a huge thing. So if you ever watch the movie Dogtown Z-Boys, like you'll see them all in there.
I've not,
there's actors that are playing them, but But anyways, after doing stuff for Fox and starting blogs, because that's what was happening, I was already doing murals with Davey, and I did a mural at Fox Racing, and like my murals started getting around. Like I did a mural at Dragon Opticals, the Somewhere brand with the dragon.
Okay.
I started doing murals everywhere for I was working for peanuts. I didn't know how to charge stuff. It was like, hey, you paint the mural, we'll give you this much money, we'll give you a shit ton of glasses. I was like, sick, so I was like, yeah, let's go, So I was leaving my mural mark everywhere, and
Yeah.
so then
Are you branding yourself at all? Like,
yeah.
beyond the people that.
Oh, not professionally. I was
Right.
leaving my mark, and hey,
No,
Tocayo.
branding, like in terms of like personal brand. Like, I need to let people know who I am, or were you a little bit more on the down low?
I was more on the down low. If you knew me, you knew me, and it was like tight circles of artists and like skaters and surfers, and like it was a very cool clique to
Yeah.
be a part of. Like there was a band called Screeching Weasel, and they had a band like it's a real cool club, and you're not a part of it. So I was part of that club, and like so friends of friends always like hired me. Like I was not looking for work at the time, so.
Yeah.
Besides working for these like big brands, I was still doing a lot of side work. Like This is when I first met my wife, then girlfriend. I would drive to Orange County because I still lived in northern San Diego, work all day, come back down, and then paint all night for an upcoming group art show or a solo show or, I always had things going on. I didn't have kids, I had tired, I would never got tired. I would wake up early and go surf before driving an hour and a half to work, I miss those days. Now I drink 2 beers and I can't wake up until 10 in the morning.
Cold, lonely tear just coming down his cheek right now.
Yes. But sorry, that was a long side story, but Billabong somehow heard of me, and I had a whole bunch of friends that worked at Billabong that I knew from Reef and Fox.
Okay.
And so when I went to Billabong, basically I had like 12 references that worked there. So I was a shoe-in. I didn't know this, but I went into the interview like all prepared and and I was like, hey, what's up? Super professional. And it felt like I was hanging at a bar with like all my friends.
Oh my God.
While I was being interviewed. And I was like, man, these guys are really cool. Like these guys are interviewing me, or like, And so anyways,
basically everything you would hope for when you're thinking about what an interview with Billabong would actually be. It would kind of suck if you would go to a Billabong interview and it's like a bunch of tightwads with like, shirt and tie and going, yeah, come on, sit down here, have a cigar, and let me tell you about what Billabong is all about.
Oh my God, yeah. No, dude, you're talking about like, these are legends of the industry, surf and skate industry. I didn't know that at the time because I just met them, but if I start naming names, you're like, holy shit, this guy started Stance. This guy started, like all these brands and, But after the interview, I was driving home and my wife was pregnant with her first kid, Coco. And I was like, hey, babe, that interview actually went really well. And mind you, I was working at Fox Racing with one of my best friends who was my mentor. This is not that long ago.
When was this?
This was
9 years ago?
Yeah, it was, a little longer than that. Maybe 10 years, 11 years. Yeah. But anyways, so I was working for that guy, Matt Alvarez, who like basically made me a made man. Like I was like the mob, dude. I was unfireable. Like
what?
Yeah, so I was unfireable at Fox, but I was maxed out as what I could make, and it doesn't matter if I was like crushing it with my art or whatever. I was maxed out. So I told him, like, I didn't tell him anything at the time. I told him, like, hey, Billabong wants to interview me, and he was like, go for it, do it. How rad is that to have your boss tell you, like, go do it, I can't get you any more money, go interview.
It's about as good as it gets.
Yeah, so I interviewed at Billabong, was driving home, called my wife, and I was like, hey babe, it went really well, like, super sick. I told her what they offered me. They were like, I before I even left the parking lot, I had an email from them with an offer letter, and they're offering me like $30,000 more than I was making at Fox to do the exact same thing and not have any employees to manage. And I was like, oh my God. And she was like, take the job. So I called my boss and I was like, hey, you think Fox Racing will match it? I was more like lazy about like, oh, I'm going to transfer my 401k and my like health insurance. And he's like, get the fuck out of Fox. Like, go for it. Like, do it, dude. Like, if they're offering you that much money, we're not going to match you, dude. Like, just go. And I was like, all right, I'm out. And then, I worked for Billabong for another 6, almost 7 years. And then,
How was that?
It was amazing. I loved it, dude. I did a campaign for a world champ. This guy, Italo Ferreira. I did his entire, like, campaign. So when he won the world title, they were flying flags with my art. He was wearing the shirt I did, and people were wearing hats I did. I was like, dude, this is insane. And every other surf contest that Billabong did, I became their poster guy. So I started doing posters for like Mundaka Pipeline, like all these like events, maybe not Mundaka. That's early. That predates me. Sorry, the beer's kicking in. But dude, to this day, it was like that was another job that I felt like I probably would still have if I would have never left California. But my wife's career like kicked in, and like my wife's a badass. And
what does she do?
She's a professor, and she runs the history department at NC State.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So she was offered a job at OU at the time, and they were going to pay her Cali money. And living in Oklahoma was mad cheap. So I had to strongly consider, like, I'm going to quit surfing and I'm going to quit playing on, like, my favorite baseball team that I'm, like we were badasses. Like, my baseball team was legit. This was all fun side projects. Yeah. But anyways, we left. And I moved to Oklahoma and started my own, like, graphic design studio called Stakeout Studios. And I guess it still kind of exists, but, like, the wind left my sails a long time ago, because Oklahoma wasn't that inspiring. Very nice people, but it wasn't inspiring. And now it was our stepping stone to get to Raleigh, and now we're here, and I'm pumped. Like, I've met all these folks, including you, and, like, dude, I hit the ground running here. Like, maybe not work-wise, but, like, as far as contacts, like, dude, so many talented people here. Everyone's hella nice, like, and the talent is like next level, dude. Like, from culinary to art to like, you name it. Like, tech. Dude, yeah, it's insane, dude. It really like is. I am so pumped to be here, and like, I'm thinking this is my forever home. Like, I don't know where else I'm gonna go after this. Like,
it's hard to I've been here since I was in 3rd grade. I'm in my upper 40s now, which seems weird to me, but when I went to college in Savannah, I went to Savannah College of Art and Design, as many of our listeners know, and I was not intending to stay in Raleigh. I was not intending to even come back here. And I noticed when I came back that there was something very interesting happening here. And that was 20 years ago now. And now it's just as you say, man, there's just so much interesting stuff happening here. I'm very excited, man. It's happening on many different levels. And it's so interesting too, because, even people from particularly like people from California, they have no idea what's happening here. It's just now getting to the point where Raleigh is becoming a place where all over the country they're starting to know that, hey, if you don't want to move to Austin for whatever reason, politics or etc., Raleigh is the next best thing, And so from the you're a perfect example, man. Super talented creative, now living here. you're just adding to the gene pool. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing. It's very exciting. So I'm saying this as a personal plug to Raleigh because I want every creative to move down here. It's such an amazing place, such a great place to network, to grow. There's no excuse now because, to be frank, I mean, we're living in the future. You know, now you can work from wherever you want. You can do whatever you want. You can create whatever you want at the flip of an iPad. You know, it's an amazing, amazing thing. So it's so awesome to see you here. But so you got here, and now, like, what's your next move? I know you're doing a lot of stuff with like breweries as an example, which is obviously, if anybody knows anything about North Carolina culture, breweries are a huge part of it, right? I mean, Asheville is just pumping. It's one of the most vibrant brewery cities in the country. Raleigh's not that far behind. The Triangle is, in general, for those who don't know, the Triangle is Raleigh, Durham, Chapel Hill, but there's also secondary communities, towns, and stuff like that. Apex, Holly Springs, Cary, et cetera, Garner, where there's just all kinds of opportunities for artists to do fantastic and expansive things. CPG, murals, comics. I mean, it's just coming from all different areas. Like, what is kind of your next hope and move for, you know, just being here in this community?
Well, I'm hoping to kind of leave my mark like I did in San Diego and Orange County, and you know, I mentioned Oklahoma wasn't that inspiring to me, except for the people were super nice, and it was like, you know, really nice place. But right before I left, I did two of the hardest murals I've ever done, and came out here and immediately hit the ground running. I did a mural at a restaurant in Greensboro, and that was fun because I didn't actually have to paint it. They just vinyl, you know, pasted it onto the wall, and it looks sick. So I was like, dude, this is sick. I can get into this vinyl mural thing and just charge a little less for it. It's a restaurant called Joey's Burger Shack in Greensboro, and it's amazing. And his brother has a pizza joint right next door called Gusto's, and it's, dude, they ordered a pizza oven from Italy here, and they like had to like find special connections to like plug in the oven because it was, you know,
they got the European.
Oh yeah, right, dude, they tiled it all up, and dude, the pizza is unreal too.
Wow.
So I'm gonna be doing some more work with those guys in the future once I get settled down. I'm still moving into my house right now.
Yeah.
And getting settled, but like I'm really looking forward to like growing here. And like so I play baseball. One of my like best friends out here right now is this guy Joseph, who does insane sign painting. He started a team called the Carolina Kudzu, and it's a Sandlot team. We drink beers, have a fun time. Like one of your employees, Joey, plays on another team. Sometimes he plays with us, and whenever he plays with us, I'm like, we're gonna win. Joey's the legend, you know. Like he plays with the Raleigh Reapers, and it's a really tight-knit Sandlot community. And I, you know, when I was in Oklahoma, I played for the Tulsa Rumblers, and dude, we were badasses. Like we had sick uniforms, and like, you know, we were sponsored by Danny Boy from House of Pain, and he owns the Outsiders Museum. And so, dude, the Sandlot movement's insane. But like, you know, I know this isn't about, you know, baseball, but like, man, it goes hand in hand because these guys and these baseball teams are all creatives.
Yeah, 100%.
So like, you know, my buddy Brian does insane woodwork for almost all the breweries here in Raleigh and Durham, and, you know, and everywhere. And
you got Alex Berner too, is a phenomenal photographer who's a part of the Sandlot team.
Oh, too. Absolutely. Yeah.
Sandlot
so
League.
You have all these dudes that like, this is their release.
Yeah.
But they're all creatives. So like I'm meeting these people while playing baseball, and they're like, hey, I got a brewery you may want to do something for. And I'm like, shoot, you know, if you approve it, then I'm going to do it. You know, like I don't care what they pay me, you know, like as long as it's like part of the fam, and, you know, and you're okay with it. Like, I can't complain, man. I landed in Raleigh at a very good time. because I came here and already had friends set up.
Yeah.
And that's beautiful. And thanks to the power of social media, because, you know, I wouldn't have met half these guys, you know,
Totally.
if it wasn't for Instagram or Facebook, you know, like maybe not so much Facebook, but I talk to my aunts on Facebook.
right. Yeah. Well, tell everybody where they can find you, man. Like where can they connect with you on social media? Speaking of.
Well, I'm most active on Instagram, but if you DM me, there's a good chance it'll take me a few weeks before I actually read the stuff, because I get a lot of junk stuff. But I'm on Instagram. My handle is El Gran Tocayo, ELGRANTOCAYO. So I was like, okay, yeah, it's like my artist name is actually just Tocayo, but because Tocayo is so common in Spanish cultures, it means like namesake. Like, you know, you're Mike. What if I was Mike and your cousin's Mike? Like, we're all Mikes. We're like, hey, what's up, Mike? You know, like we just call each other Tocayos.
Yeah.
So like my artist name is Tocayo, and so I became like a Spanish magician, the Great Tocayo, El Gran Tocayo.
In fact, I know it's a little weird because nobody can see it, but he's actually wearing a cape right now.
I am. I'm super elusive. I live in the shadows.
Juan, it has been such a great pleasure having you on the podcast. We're going to have to do a part 2 because there's so much more we got to talk about. I would love to talk to you about process. You know, I want to dig into the weeds, man. It's rare that I get to talk to like a straight up illustrator in the studio. And man, we'll do this again, and we'll crack open maybe not necessarily some beers, but maybe some tequila and maybe a little bit of rum too, man, to bring it back to the roots. If you're down for that.
Yeah, it's gonna get rowdier.
Awesome.
It's gonna get hella rowdy.
All right, my brother. Have a great night. Thank you so much for being here and being a part of this podcast, man.
Absolutely, man. Thank you for having me. I'm honored, dude. Seriously, as a newbie to Raleigh, I'm pumped, man. Thank you.
Awesome, man. Cheers, brother.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for listening to the Pencil Pushers Podcast. Follow us on Instagram at the Pencil Pushers Podcast for visual representation of our guest artwork, topics discussed, and anything else that contributes to the show. Be sure to subscribe. Tell a friend. Tell lots and lots of friends. Become a leadhead. And we're out.